Hi all, this is part 2 of our review on operations and polynomials and the remainder theorem. I am starting on page 2 for this one, beginning with problem number 6 and using synthetic division. Be sure that when you are taking the summative, you are reading the questions to make sure if it's asking for long division, you're performing long division. If it's asking for evaluating or synthetic division, you have to be worked through that process, okay? So for number 6, divide using synthetic division. All right, on this one, the x plus 2 here is our divisor, what we are using to divide. And then the 4x cubed polynomial is the dividend. That is what is being, well, divided. That's what's going inside our synthetic division tool here. Okay, oops, it's kind of strange there. Okay, now first things we need to check, we need to look at our degrees, make sure that it is in standard form and that every degree is listed. Okay, we also need to take this x plus 2 over here and we need to find out what the value of x is. In this case, it would be x is equal to negative 2. That negative 2 is what we are using to divide, okay? So since all of our degrees are there and it's in standard form, I'm going to go ahead and just write out the coefficients. So I have 4, negative 2, 1, and negative 3. Okay. Go ahead, if you haven't yet, pause this video, try this one on your own, and then come back and see how you did. Okay, or if you get stuck, then come back and check for that clarification. Remember what I said in class. If your brain isn't hurting a little, then you're not thinking, you're just copying. And copying isn't going to help us at this point. We need to think through this process. Okay, so go ahead and pause this. All right, using synthetic division, the first term gets dropped down. So after we divide out that negative, or when we have that negative 2, we're going to do negative 2 times 4. That gives me negative 8. We are going to add these or combine these terms together. So that gives me negative 10. Negative 2 times negative 10 gives me positive 20. When we are combining those together, we get 21. And negative 2 times 21 gives me negative 42. Okay. And negative 3 minus 42 gives me negative 45. Now, there will be a remainder here. So our remainder will either be 0 or our remainder will be some value other than 0. Okay, so make sure that you box that last term to determine whether it's got a remainder of 0 or not. Okay, all right, let's see. So on this one, now that we've got this, we've divided out a term, an x term or a factor. So now our solution is 4. Instead of being x to the 3rd power, it is x squared. Negative 10x plus 21, and our remainder is negative 45 over the divisor. That is x plus 2. Okay. Also, one of the things we talked about today, would this be part of the remainder theorem or the factor theorem? Well, since it has a remainder, it is going to be part of the remainder theorem. Okay. All right, number 7. Again, pause it, go ahead and try it, and then come back and check your work. Okay, number 7. Given this function, f of x equals 2x cubed plus x squared minus 5, use the remainder theorem to find f of negative 2. Okay, so we are going to evaluate this one to see if negative 2 is or is not a solution. Okay, So everywhere there's an x, we're going to replace it with -2. So we are going to have 2 times -2 cubed plus -2 squared minus 5. Okay. This gives us 2 times -8 plus 4 minus 5. Okay. And that will give us -17. So in this case, when we want to evaluate what is the solution when we substitute or evaluate with -2, our solution is -17. So if I had to ask you, is this factor theorem or remainder theorem? Is this a factor or is it not? This one here is not a factor. If it was a factor, then the y would be 0. So this is part of the remainder theorem. Okay? All right, number 8. The volume of a rectangular prism is represented by the expression 3x cubed minus x squared minus 62x minus 40. If the length is x plus 4, what are the other two dimensions? Okay. Looking at this one, knowing that I have this as my divisor, I can use synthetic division or I can use long division, whichever you prefer. They didn't ask me to pick one or the other, so I'm going to go ahead and go with synthetic division on this one. Okay. So we've got x equals -4. That's our factor. Okay, so that's our first solution is going to be x plus 4. We're trying to find the other two factors. Looking at my polynomial up here, it is in standard form. I have the third degree, I have the second degree, I have the first degree, and I have a constant. So I've got 3, -1, -62, and -40. Drop down the first term. -4 times 3 is -12. So that gives me -13. Negative times a negative is a positive. 4 times 13, well, 2 times 13 is 26. So if I double that, that gives me 52. And I've got -10. -4 times -10 is a positive 40, which gives me 0. Remember, we will always have a remainder. Okay. And this time, if it's telling me that x plus 4 is a solution, I should expect that my remainder would be 0. So in this case, I'm now left with 3x squared minus 13x minus 10. Okay. When we talked about this in class, when we talked about what was your preferred method to continue solving this one, was it factoring? Was it completing the square, or was it using the quadratic formula? Most of you in class chose the quadratic formula. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the quadratic formula. I would highly suggest that you have the quadratic formula memorized or jotted down, and the steps to solving the quadratic formula if that's something you still need that support on. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and simplify the discriminant of that trinomial. Okay. So A is going to equal 3, B is -13, and C is -10. Okay. So for the discriminant, we have B squared minus 4AC, so -13 squared minus 4 times A times C. So I have 169. This is going to be a positive 120. When I 169 plus 120. Give me 1 second. Just checking my work here for a second. All right, so 169 plus 120 will give me 289. Okay. So once we have our discriminant, we can go ahead and then plug that into the whole quadratic equation and work from there. So we have x equals opposite b plus or minus the square root of 289 over 2 times a. Okay. This is where we can break this up into two solutions. So we have x is equal to 13 plus square root of 289 is 17 divided by 6. And we can have x equals 13 minus 17 divided by 6. 13 plus 17, that gives me 30. So I get x equals 5. And on this one over here, I get negative 4 over 6. So x equals negative 2 over 3. Okay. So taking those two though, so even though we want to say that our width is x equals 5, we do have to set it equal to 0. So when I move that positive 5 to the other side, this factor becomes x minus 5. The height, I have x is equal to negative 2 over 3. Okay, when I set it equal to 0, I'm multiplying both sides by x so that I would have 3x equals negative 2. Moving that negative 2 to the other side, I would have 3x plus 2 would be my second factor. And again, our original factor was the one they gave us, which was x plus 4. Okay. And just noting something, in one of our classes today, I believe we subtracted this where we got 49. So we need to make sure that that negative times a negative is a positive so that we add that one. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop here and go on to part 3.